Mehrasa, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Paul. And hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us today.
It's really fantastic to have you here. I must say that I saw your plenary at PanSig, and I just knew that I had to have you on Tiltal.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to know and to be in touch with you, and also to contribute to all great stuff that you're doing, including Tiltal and all your projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to kick off with kind of asking you a little bit more about yourself, because I think your context, your situation is quite unique and quite interesting. So the first question I'm going to ask is, and it's a question that most teachers dread answering, but let's see how you feel about it. What motivated you to become an English teacher in Japan?
Thanks very much for that question. So, well, let me go back a little bit in time and start from the time when I myself started learning English as a foreign language back at home in Iran. I started learning the language myself when I was about 11 years old, and I kept doing that, and I was very interested in learning English. So I didn't have as many resources back then, but I think I did all the best I could to learn the language well enough to be hopefully able to teach it. And when I was in high school, I decided to change my, I was supposed to go into engineering, but I refused to do that. And instead, I did my bachelor's in English language and literature, and later moved on to English language teaching. And since I was an undergrad student, when I finished my first year, I started teaching English part-time at the same language school where I learned English myself. It's, by the way, a chain school, so it's got branches all over the country. I studied at the one in my hometown, but then I started teaching at one of the branches in Tehran. And so that kicked off my career in language teaching and my interest in teaching English as a foreign language, because I learned it in such a context myself. And years later, after doing my graduate studies, I wanted to go study abroad, perhaps live out of Iran for a major part of my life. And so, in the beginning, as perhaps most people in Iran do think so, I wanted to move to an English-speaking country because that's the language I knew. And I tried that once when I was a master's student, but I wasn't prepared enough for that, so I failed. And instead, during that same time, I happened to come to Japan for a conference presentation, and this country got me interested in it. And I didn't know much about Japan, or nothing about its language. And when I went back home, I did a little bit of research, finding out that, there are chances to come to Japan and to study here as a government-sponsored student. And so I went through that whole process, which took over a year. And then, unlike most people who are probably here with us tonight, or most friends who are in the same profession in Japan, I came as a student. So I did my graduate studies here, and that's how I started teaching English here too. First part-time when I was a student, and now full-time for the past, officially starting from this year, but it's my 4th year working in Japan. I've been teaching on and off, but right now, teaching is my main career, and I do enjoy doing research on language education too.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Mehrasa, for covering all of that. So just to get the basics, just to reiterate the basics, you were born and grew up in Iran, is that correct?
Yes. That's right. Yeah.
And then would you say that your first, what would be your first language, that your mother language?
Yeah, I miss mentioning that. It's Persian, or Farsi as sometimes referred to. So It's an Indo-European language, but pretty much, different from English or Japanese, the other two languages that I know.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that you started learning English from a very young age then? Like you were kind of a bilingual from a very young age, English?
I started about for the end of elementary school, so maybe not that early as most children do these, they start learning languages well off in in kindergarten. So that didn't happen to me. I finished elementary school. I was already, yeah, maybe a teenager when I started learning English.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, in Iran, does English have a status as a second language, or is it more like a foreign language like it is in Japan?
It is similar to the context of Japan. So English for us is a foreign language, not a second language. So we don't use it out of class.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you were saying before that you were expected to study technology. So is there a kind of a lot of pressure put on young people to go into STEM careers rather than like languages and humanities?
Depends. It pretty much depends on, well, maybe the family you grow up in or your school. The school I went to, and also perhaps my family too, kind of expected me to major in engineering, and they knew I was capable of doing math, physics, and related subjects. But then nobody thought, well, studying English perhaps has that high of a status for somebody like me who is also capable of other subjects. So they wanted me to always use English as a medium to get other stuff done, not as my main subject of study or career.
I understand. So the pressure was coming mainly from your family and not from society at large then?
Society very much too, my school too, my school teachers, when they found out later than my family, of course. So they were very much opposed to the idea of me changing. Like in Iran, by the way, in Japan, we do have this like humanities and social sciences, bunke, and then the engineering and science field, rike categories. But in Iran, we do have more. We have actually 5 different categories to apply for when you're taking the entrance exam to enter universities as an undergraduate student. And there's one category for foreign languages, and that's the only one I sat for the exam for. So I didn't even take the math.
You didn't want to give yourself you didn't want to give yourself like a fallback option, like a plan B. You were going 100% for plan A.
I didn't, yeah. And in fact, well, I don't usually mention that, but in that test, that national entrance exam, I kind of came ranked first. So
okay.
I knew I was kind of confident I could at least get into one of the good universities in Tehran. Perhaps didn't think I would come first in that exam, but yeah, it happened. And so it probably kind of made people a little bit more convinced that, well, maybe she really likes it and she'll be successful.
Okay. I think it sounds to me like you've been overcoming barriers all your life to pursue your passion. Would that be a correct characterization?
Yes, I would say that is very true, especially studying in Iran and learning a language away from the culture or being connected to other countries or even the internet. I would say that these days, even if you don't get out of Iran, you have many resources online. There's still barriers to overcome, of course, with internet filtering and other issues, but still, I would describe the situation now to be a lot better and a lot easier to have access to different resources than when I was learning the language. So my only references were my textbooks, not even authentic textbooks, really like textbooks. And no multimedia content really was around for years. Later on, only maybe CDs and later DVDs became available, but never nothing on the internet, no websites. Well, in general, educational technology for language learning was not as developed when I was learning the language back then. But compared to other countries and to other contexts, I would say I would describe my own as a low resource one.
Okay. So you what age did you first come to Japan? Can I ask?
I came to Japan when I was 26 or 27 almost, yeah.
Okay. I came when I was 24. I think that's a kind of quite common age to come, like early to mid-20s, isn't it? Yeah.
That's
so
right.
The next 2 questions I want to ask you kind of tie into each other. It sounds like you've really found a home here in Japan, and I know that you have N1, which is the highest level of Japanese ability. Anyone who's studying Japanese, I think you can take this thing called the JLPT, right? Japanese Language Proficiency Test, and it comes in 5 levels. I passed N3, and I believe, if I'm correct, you've passed N1. Is that right?
That's right, last December.
Right. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And it's really difficult because obviously Japanese language has hiragana, katakana, and kanji, and so I'm interested in that, and also your decision to naturalize. I also understand that you've recently started an application to naturalize as a Japanese citizen. So if you could talk a little bit about how you learned the Japanese language and how you learned to live in the Japanese culture, and also how that tied into your decision to naturalize, that would be really interesting.
Sure, thank you. Well, learning Japanese, was quite a struggle for me, honestly, like it is for most people. So when I entered Osaka University in the first year, I was placed into they had 3 levels of the intensive Japanese course, and I was placed in level 2, whereas my level was barely beyond level 1, slightly over level 1. I did study a little bit before coming here, the last 6 months when I stayed at home. But what I learned in those 6 months were probably reviewed in the first week of class. So as you can imagine, the pace was pretty fast. And I usually tend to describe it like in Krashen's terms.
Right, right.
Input plus 1 for me was like really input plus 1,000.
Right.
I'm not really exaggerating, but yeah, it was very overwhelming. And I remember there were times when I felt so overwhelmed in class and so like behind my classmates. We were only 6, by the way. So I entered in October, so there were not that many. Like the incoming cohort is not as big in October as it is in April, which is the like beginning of the school year in Japan. So in that semester with other 6 students, 2 of whom were Chinese, and like 2 Thai and 1 from Panama. We were a good group, but I did feel from the very beginning that, oh my gosh, like the knowledge gap is really huge here. They know things that I don't. And just because they have learned it over the years, and the teachers assume that everybody in this class knows all of those. And that plus to enter graduate school, the grad school that I was aiming for when I applied for the mixed scholarship, that grad school does its entrance exam in Japanese. And the reason perhaps why the teachers, the professors in the language education department there for international students placed me in level 2 was that they knew I'd have to be ready for a test coming up, like an entrance exam coming up in a couple of months, maybe a year at its, if I really tended to delay that. But yeah, that was a huge overtaking. And the exam was in Japanese, by the way. It was a written test in Japanese. I don't think I can pass that test ever.
So you applied to do a PhD at Osaka University.
Yes.
And at the same time as studying for the PhD, you were studying Japanese. Is that right?
Yeah, but when you come to Japan on this scholarship, they give you a period of transition between the time just as you arrive, you're given time to learn Japanese and perhaps to find your feet in the new context before you start your graduate studies. And in between, you need to take the entrance exam to officially enter a degree program. Because the program you come to Japan is a non-degree program. They call it research student period, or kinkyusei. What is your status? Something, you're not a regular student yet officially. So yeah, that period of time I could study Japanese and get myself into a graduate school so that I can extend my scholarship. That is like a requirement, a condition to keep the scholarship going on beyond the initial 2-year period that it's been intended for. And to do that, I did have to try hard, but then later, I think this was a huge motivation. I did make a lot of good friends at the university who helped me out. Also in the local community, when I moved to the neighborhood where I'm still living, I joined the gym, and I think that helped me improve my Japanese quite a lot. So I was in touch with the local people.
I
Learning.
remember my when I first moved to Japan, my friend joined a gym and he said he just wants to go and work out, and people keep trying to talk to him, and he's like, "Look, I don't want to talk. I just want to work out," because he was an English
That's
teacher. He spent
interesting.
all day talking to people, and when he goes to the gym, he wants to just work out in silence.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess for you it was okay, yeah.
Yeah, for me it was okay. Plus, people wanted, yeah, well, maybe, well, they were willing to speak to me in Japanese, so
Mm-hmm.
that was good for me. And
Oh, that's
not
good.
usually during workout, but
Yeah.
mostly, yeah, when we were showering in the locker room with the ladies. So yeah,
Okay.
there was a lot of chat. And
Okay.
so gradually, I would say that I managed, well, as my Japanese improved, I managed to make more and more friends. And this helped me, yeah, feel more comfortable in Japan, and also to, well, I always say this to people I talk to about this topic. I think if you know Japanese, you can live life to a fuller level, to a
Mm,
better level living in Japan.
mm,
Not knowing the language brings with it a lot of misunderstandings, or a lot of, I don't know, like issues that make you kind of not like or not enjoy your life here as much. But I would say a lot of it goes back to language barriers that you experience in the end. So
mhm.
after I overcame that, and I got my conversational level of Japanese to a level that, or maybe business level also, to do paperwork and different stuff, to a level that I didn't struggle. I felt like I really want to live here for the rest of my life.
Mhm. And that led
Yeah.
you on to your decision to naturalize. So let's just briefly touch on that. So my understanding is that Japan does not allow dual citizenship, right? So if you become Japanese, you have to give up your original nationality.
Yes.
So is that still the case? And how do you feel about that?
Yeah, that is still the case. The reason, well, I want to naturalize is that I don't intend to go back to Iran and to live there, and I don't have any property or any, yeah, belongings there. My parents live there, of course, my family, relatives too. But I feel like, well, I can get to see my parents in Japan or outside Iran. Well, I could also go back to Iran even if I renounce my nationality as a Japanese national.
Mm,
But yeah, I feel like there's more advantages, there's more to gain than to lose if I do that. And especially as an international researcher, I feel like I need a valid, like an accredited travel document, and the Japanese passport is a really good one. So
mhm,
I am a permanent resident, by the way, because having done a PhD here helped me get that status really quickly after 1 year of working here. But with that, I still am not entitled the Japanese travel document. So to
mhm,
get a better passport, and for several other reasons, I decided to go down the path of naturalization.
mhm,
It
mhm,
is a lot of work,
mhm.
honestly. It took me a month, and I'm still working on the document. Some people just outsource it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't do that because I felt like it wasn't that bad. I
Mm,
can handle
mm,
that. There are stuff to come from Iran, things that I need to collect here, things that I need to fill out. But yeah, I'm almost getting to the end of round one of collecting documents, and keeping my fingers
mm,
crossed that they will be accepted. And hopefully, sometime later, I will be on Tiltal giving you the
mm.
good news of
I hope
having
so. I hope so.
naturalized.
I'd like to get into the nitty gritty of the technology now. Okay, so people who
Sure.
are chomping at the bit to get into the technology, we're gonna jump in the deep end right now. Okay, so Mehrasa, I believe that you're one of the original founders of the Maver SIG for gel. Is that right?
Yes, we tend to call it Maver, by the way.
Maver, sorry,
And
Maver. Yeah.
yes, no problem. It's for those people who may not have heard of the SIG. Yes, thank you for putting that in the chat. It's the mixed, augmented, and virtual realities in learning SIG.
Hmm.
I was one of the people who tried to collect signatures to show that we have enough supporters and potential members to get the SIG started. Our coordinator is Eric Hawkinson, and yeah, we're a small group. perhaps not as active as we should be as a SIG officially, but we are very passionate about what we do. So we are a small group of researchers who are working on different stuff. Throughout today's interview, I think I'll be pointing out to some of the projects that my colleagues in Mayver have been doing and working on over the years. But yes, I think it was a very good start.
So just to provide context for people in the audience who are not based in Japan, Japan has this JALT, National Society, which stands for Japan Association of Language Teaching. It doesn't just cover English, it covers all languages, but English tends to be one of the main languages covered in JALT. And Mehrasa started a SIG, which is a special interest group. And it was a new SIG, and it was called Mayver. And it stands for Mixed, Augmented, and Virtual Realities. And in our little logo here on the left side, you can see these little acronyms, MR, VR, and AR. So what I'd like to do now is just go through a definition of terms, because people in the audience could be different levels of understanding about these technologies, Mehrasa. So we're going to assume, we're not going to make any assumptions. Okay, so we're going to define what these terms mean, starting maybe with VR. What's VR?
Okay, so these terms are a lot more commonly heard these days. So I'm sure people in the audience have heard of virtual reality at least once, and many of them may have experienced it, may own a VR device themselves, like we see an icon here with 360-degree on the graphic. Well, basically, as the name suggests, virtual reality is a kind of technology that immerses you in a virtual world and that completely, in most cases, closes off the real world. And in that world, you're able to appear as an avatar in most cases, be able to interact with other avatars, other users, and perhaps some interactive objects in the environment, to be able to communicate using audio, and also your avatar as the visual representation of you as the user in VR. Well, again, when it comes to VR, these days we see all these different ranges of VR based on the level of immersion. And by immersion, we mean how immersed, how cut away from the outside world you are, the degree to which you decide to shut off the outside world. So if you're using a headset, obviously, when you put on the goggles or headset, you are completely away from the outside world. Yeah, thank you for sharing that graphic. And you are immersed fully into the virtual environment. And as the image here shows, the person is holding what we call a controller that usually helps you with feeling, some vibration, some haptic feedback. If you touch an object, or if you try to interact with an interactive object, you get some haptic feedback. And also to move your hands or to wave or do different like thumbs up or different sort of reactions in the VR environment, those controllers are at your help.
Understood. Okay, yeah. So immersive, in this sense, the VR is the most immersive of those three different technologies. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
But these days we do have different ranges of immersion, as I mentioned. I think web VR is really catching up these days, with people, well, not always being able to have a head-mounted display or one of these headsets. And also because, well, they are available on different devices and on browsers only. So I would say that, this movement toward web VR is a very promising one.
So with web VR, you're not using a headset. Everything is just being shown inside the browser. Is that correct?
That is right. Yes. In most cases, some companies may have developed their own standalone apps, but in most cases, if you're following the standards of Open VR and Web VR, your system, your platform would be working on a browser that is available across different devices. Could work on a computer, on sometimes a mobile phone or a tablet too, but any device with a browser pretty much.
Okay, okay. Let's go on to the next one, which is AR. And I'm going to show an image here that might help people to understand as well. So I think this represents AR, this image here.
Right.
Could you explain what is AR and how it differs from VR, maybe?
Sure. First of all, with the acronym, it stands for augmented reality. Well, reality is what we all see with our two eyes, with naked eyes. And when you are augmenting or putting some extra layer of information on the real world and usually viewing it through the lens of a camera, like we are doing, like we see here in this image, you are augmenting your view of the real world, and thus you are using a technology that's called augmented reality. And yeah, usually to add extra information, like in this case, in this like warehouse or whatever it is, you're adding extra layers of information about the items in this space. So it could be geographical information about a place, like if you're holding it against a street, you could get information about different businesses, maybe restaurants or places, public places in that area. And so, yeah, it augments our view of the world.
So this is an image that I saw a video for this recently on YouTube. Google announced that they have this technology that can now listen to someone speaking in a foreign language, translate it into English or another language, and show those translations on the user's glasses in real time. So it's like having subtitles for the real world. I'm not sure if have you seen this video, Mehrasa?
Not this one, but I'm interested. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is this kind of technology? Do you think? Well, we can come on to that later. But this is another example of AR that isn't perhaps available yet, but will be coming in the near future, maybe. Yeah.
Sure. We have a simpler version of that in Google Translate already. So when you start the camera on Google Translate and you hold it against the text or a signpost or anything, you can now immediately see it in another language, in your target language that you select on Google Translate. So it's basically the same thing, except that you don't have to hold the phone. You're wearing the glasses, and your view is being augmented seamlessly. And in the future, I think the tendency is toward having these displays smaller and more transparent, so you can't easily tell. There's some barrier between the user and the view.
Okay. And just to close the loop on these acronyms, so we've got VR, we've got AR, MR. Then would that be a combination of VR and AR? MR?
Yes, it stands for mixed reality, and usually, well, when we get to this term, let me very quickly share.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Image, yes. Okay, so to clarify these terms, Milgram and his colleagues have created in 1994, actually, a diagram like this, a continuum. They call it the reality virtuality continuum that summarizes these different types of technologies and where they fall on this continuum. So yeah, as you see, on one side, we have the real environment. On the other, we have the virtual environment that is full immersion VR, when you put on a headset and you can't see anything from the outer world. And then in between, there's different levels of augmentation. And yeah, with augmented reality, AR, that has part of the real world with some digital objects or extra information, additional layers overlaid on your view of the real world. And with augmented virtuality, which is a virtual world with some objects, real objects appearing into it. Maybe we don't really see much of this yet, but I would say that with wearable technologies, we're going to move toward the middle of this continuum more and more, not being completely shut off from the world, but also having a view of the actual world with an augmented view of the world, basically. So mixed reality, would be this part of the continuum, basically, depending on where you're talking about, which part you want to focus on.
And this was developed back in the early 90s, you said?
I think it's a 1994 conference paper that has been highly cited. Yes. In fact,
Wow.
one of the authors is my PhD supervisor.
Oh, okay. So these technologies are not really new, are they? They've kind of they've kind of come back into fashion, but they've been around for decades, haven't they?
Yes, yes, I would say they've been around. Maybe they haven't been in the hands of ordinary people from a
Mhm.
long time ago, but yeah, we definitely see them being developed more and more. And perhaps what used to be common in the old days is making a comeback in just a new fashion.
Okay. I just want to ask you another question about you touched on it earlier on. I'm just going to share my screen again here. This is a
Okay.
website called Spatial, spatial.io, and it's basically a virtual world that runs within the browser. Okay. Now,
Yes.
as far as you're concerned, is this virtual reality? Or can it be virtual reality without having complete immersion, in your opinion?
Yes, I mentioned web VR, I think, in my talk previously, and I do believe that these environments have as much value as fully immersive environments do. Perhaps even more, because the HMDs, the head-mounted displays that we have in the market, are either sometimes expensive, but if they come with a high resolution and good quality, yeah, in this case, they're pretty expensive and costly. And if you go for cheaper ones, there's problems of cyber sickness and heaviness and so
Mm,
many other, yeah, so the weight of the device and its resolution and quality can create health concerns for the users. So
mhm,
you can't really use those devices over a long period of time. And I would say that, yeah, web VR is just as good. Why not? It doesn't
mhm,
always even have to be 3D. In fact, recently I've been experimenting with Gather, that is a 2D environment.
mhm,
And I find it just as effective for the purpose of language learning, because we're not really dealing with 3D objects to like get a better understanding of, let's say, a DNA, for example, structure. If you are in the field of natural sciences or in other fields where 3D models could help you gain a better understanding of a concept, maybe those 3D environments could have a benefit over 2D environments. But for us in our profession in language learning and teaching, I would say that 2D environments even would be just as valuable.
Okay. You mentioned Gather. I just want to show this to the audience here. This is Gather, gather.town. Yeah, and this is what I think in Japan also we had the JALT call SIG, another SIG for the JALT Association, Computer Assisted Language Learning. They had a virtual kind of conference using Gather Town. When I was also lucky enough to chat to Mehrasa inside that inside that conference inside Gather Town, and I think yeah, I definitely agree with you there, Mehrasa, that it doesn't have to be 3D, it doesn't have to be immersive to be useful for language learning, and we can still call it virtual reality because it's kind of reality, but it's not quite real. It's a virtual reality, right? And
Yes.
you mentioned before HMD, which is head-mounted display. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, that's another useful acronym that we could put in the chat there. So HMD. So you don't need an HMD to do AR, VR, and to do VR. What about AR? You do need some technology to do AR, don't you? I think.
Yes, you do. The simplest could be your mobile phone that you
Mhm.
can use the camera of with some software program that's on your phone, so that you would be able to scan either a marker or a location, and then you'd be able to see a 3D object appearing there, or some sort of writing or
Mhm.
a video, or it could be anything that's
Mhm.
put into the environment. Let me
Mhm.
do a real quick screen share
Yeah,
because I
please
think,
do.
okay, yes, thank you. And yeah, I this is one of the slides that I used as Pansec, by the way. So here, when I was describing AR, I use these two categories that are in the literature, of course, not my own categorization: marker-based AR and markerless AR. So like
Mhm.
you said, you in the end need a device. be it a mobile phone or a wearable device like the HoloLens, for example, as a very high-end kind of device. And using those, you'd be either scanning a trigger that looks like maybe a QR code, but it's actually an AR marker. And then doing that, you would be able to show extra additional information that is overlaid on the real world. Or you'd be doing it in a markerless way, meaning that these devices use a different technology behind them. They basically need a flat space, and having detected that flat space, like you see in the image on top, you see these dots appearing there. So the device, my phone in this case, which I was using to put this plant in part of my living room, was trying to detect a flat space and then try to put that object there. I think if you remember AR, Google Expeditions AR, if you've ever used that, it's sunsetted by Google, by the way, so no more available, but it was pretty much using the same form of AR, where you'd be able to place like a skeleton or a dinosaur or something in the real environment.
Okay, I understand. So somebody in the chat, Mehrasa, has mentioned Google Lens. Is that something that you've used yourself, and which category does that fit into?
Yes, I would call it AR myself. And I think in those same slides, I did mention Google Lens as one of the examples of simple AR that we use every day, but may not really think of it as AR. Yes, it is definitely adding additional information to the real world, either translating things for us or showing us extra information. Yeah, it would be a very simple form of AR, but very useful at the same time.
So Google Lens is the technology behind when you point your phone at some Japanese and it comes out in English. That's Google Lens behind that, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay. So let me just go back to this. So I think we've quite thoroughly covered the different kinds of virtual realities here. So we got VR, AR, MR, XR. Then XR, would that be any of the three? What's XR?
XR stands for extended reality, and I think it's more of an umbrella term to refer to all of these different immersive technologies in general. So yeah, like your graph shows, your Venn diagram shows, it's where all those circles meet.
Okay. So you could say, so XR includes VR, AR, or MR, and MR could be a combination of VR and AR. Is that right?
Yes, anywhere in between those two extremes of the reality virtuality continuum could fall into the category of MR. Yes.
Yeah. So I want to dig down a little bit further into the hardware and the software and the implications of it. I'm thinking about the whether the pricing and the regional availability of hardware and software would affect the ability of language teachers to make use of it. And let me give you a couple of examples. I looked into using Meta Horizon, but I saw it wasn't yet available in Japan. And then I looked into purchasing a Meta Quest, and I saw it cost, several $100s. And although, I am a very, very enthusiastic tech person, it's hard to justify that cost. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts and experiences about pricing and availability are on the hardware, for example.
Yes, the hardware, especially if you want to go down the path of full immersion, I would say is not accessible yet. Because like you mentioned, even the cheapest device on the market would cost a few $100s. If you wanted to go for better views, higher resolutions, and lower latency, you would end up paying over $1,000 or several $1,000s for one single device. And for us as teachers, definitely we need things in bulk, in numbers, right? So having one device wouldn't help us. Well, it would give us as single users the experience, but it wouldn't be something that we can take into our teaching context.
When I interviewed Ewan Bonner a few months ago, who's also very interested in virtual reality, he said that the Meta Quest 2 is the gold standard in terms of hardware. Would you agree with that, or do you think it's there are other hardware out there that is slightly more affordable that would also be good?
With the pricing set for Meta Quest 2, I would say, yeah, it is a good device in terms of hardware. However, looking at it as a language teacher, I would say that a lot of the apps that you want to use end up being paid. So that adds extra layers of cost to using this. And then in the end, well, I hear that with the newer version, maybe MetaQuest 3 or whatever they call it, they're not requiring a Facebook account login for these devices. But with MetaQuest 2, it was a requirement. So it is still a requirement. So if you wanted to use it in a in an educational context, I would see this as a problem. So I did, by the way, myself buy a few of these devices, but I tried to just link them to a few accounts that I created. I know it's against policy, but yeah, if you wanted to do it in large numbers, I know they sell this for enterprises too, where you won't need Facebook accounts, but those come like at much higher prices for the same hardware. Yeah, it is a good device, but still we're far from having the technology, hardware and software go together well so that they can be used in all contexts. In fact, yeah, a lot of the web VR stuff that you mentioned previously are also available on MetaQuest 2. So I would say if you are putting on a headset of that weight to just experience that, maybe you could as well try it on a PC. Why not?
So the pricing could be prohibitive for some people. Does your institution now have access to HMDs?
No, we don't. Back at Osaka University, where I used to work until March, I got an internal grant through which I bought a few of these devices, but it was just for the purpose of research and mostly trying to experiment with these devices as an early adopter, but it's nothing that institutions have endorsed yet. So yeah, we're probably still far from that stage. Maybe the need is not that felt. Well, the pandemic hit, people needed to create everything online overnight, and maybe they didn't want to go for very difficult options because even using video conferencing tools were already quite a big challenge for many people, getting everybody trained to do that. So,
Absolutely.
well, maybe in the future, yes, but we're not probably there yet. I would say the technology needs to become better, lighter, cheaper, but that's going to take a bit of time.
So smartphones, for example, are basically ubiquitous now, aren't they? In Japan, young people between the age of 18 and 22 that we might teach at university, smartphones are basically ubiquitous amongst young people. So is it possible that the the HMDs could become as ubiquitous as smartphones, do you think?
Probably, yes. Maybe not when they're as big or as expensive, like I said. But yeah, if in the future more software perhaps is developed for these devices that ties very well into people's everyday life. Maybe the reason people own smartphones so ubiquitously is that we use it in our daily lives more than we do in education. So if it becomes a thing that people use on a daily basis, yes, I would probably say that maybe people will use it, but or buy it and own it, but maybe not yet.
It could be when it's like Google Glass, when it's built into when it's built into your glasses, and it's just there and it's on all the time. I mean, Google have already tried this, right? They tried it with Google Glass, the first version, and it didn't catch on, I think, because of privacy issues.
That is right.
Do the privacy issues concern you much at all, or do you think that the educational benefits outweigh the privacy issues?
Yeah, it is a huge issue, I would say, especially with immersive devices and with HMDs. You not only are collecting personal data, in the form of names or maybe emails, date of birth, and so on. You're also collecting biometric data, a lot of data from eye tracking, eye movements, hand movements, head motions, and so on from your learners, from your users, sorry. And well, if you're using it in educational context, it would be learners whose data you're giving to companies. Yeah. So yeah, ethical issues are a huge concern. And in our group as Maver, there's also been some presentations, some talks about that, discussions on this topic in the past. I think Eric Hawkinson, our coordinator, has also created many videos on YouTube where he talks about different privacy issues surrounding immersive technologies. Yeah, it is a bigger problem, I would say, when it comes to these technologies, because we tend to collect extra layers of data from users.
Okay. Now, I want to get your reaction on this product, which you may have seen before, Google Cardboard. Okay, so we've gone from the absolute pinnacle of technology, the Meta Quest, in terms of price and functionality, down to the absolute entry level. Have you ever used Google Cardboard, and would you recommend it to other people?
Yes, I have used it, especially with expeditions when it was around. And so Google released an app, and how many years ago was that? Maybe in 2015 or so. An app that allowed you to view different virtual tours in the form of 360-degree photos from around the world. And you could go on guided tours that were led by a teacher. So students and teachers could get together on a tour with the teacher being on an iPad or another like mobile device, and the students being on these Google Cardboard goggles with smartphones, of course, packed into them. Yes, I have used it, and I would say, yeah, it really changed the world, people's view of virtual reality, getting everybody a little bit of a hands-on experience on what VR is and how it could feel. And many schools actually adopted that, and because these cardboards are quite low in price. You can buy one for less than $1 perhaps. So yeah, if you have good 360-degree videos and photos that you want to experience in an immersive manner, I would say, yeah, these devices would work well too. If you can get them open on your smartphone, like if they're on a browser, especially on a website. I have done that before and it worked really well. Yeah, why not?
We've talked in depth about the technology, different kinds of technology. So we're all language teachers here. We want to know whether it's actually worth the effort in using technology to teach languages, whether it adds anything to the lesson, whether it actually improves outcomes, all of that kind of stuff. So I wonder if you could just give a basic overview of your opinion about that. Like, does technology actually improve the language learning experience, and what situations would it improve the experience?
Yeah, well, if used with good design and thinking in mind and considering the affordances and challenges, I would say it would benefit learners. And in my experience, engagement levels usually rise when used a sort of technology that is, of course, suitable for the purpose you're using it for. You could use technology in a not very appropriate way and get the students like demotivated. But if used properly, in my experience, they usually get more engaged, and they are the new generation who is familiar with technology already. So I think in most cases they welcome that, and they feel like, well, the teacher has put some thought and effort in designing their lessons and is willing to do something new. So maybe we also want to follow and learn something new as well. Like with telling you about my experience last semester when I used Gather in one class I taught remotely, a lot of students who were first-year students just entering university mentioned that the collaborative tasks that they did through Gather helped them make friends and get to know each other, and communication was really smooth. There were problems, of course. It was my first time and their first time using the platform. So yeah, there were glitches, issues here and there, but in general, I think their comments showed me that they valued the experience and they were very thankful to have used it and to have gone through this learning experience.
So that's one possible use case. So the use case you described there is when you were fully online. Is that right?
Yes.
During the COVID pandemic, you were fully online, and rather than using Zoom to do your synchronous lessons, you used GatherTown, which we've already shown earlier on. Is that correct?
That is right. Yes.
Yeah. So bearing in mind that most people have now gone back face to face and they're in the same classroom as their students now, are there any particularly good use cases for VR, AR, and MR that you could tell us about, maybe? And feel free to share slides if you have any.
Oh, thank you. Sure. So, well, yeah, even before the pandemic, some of these use cases I want to mention go back to pre-pandemic times. And one case use that I have seen very frequently is to use VR, for example, or even AR also to create tours, like either fully virtual tours in VR or create like hunts, like scavenger hunts or treasure hunts on campus, getting people to go visit different places, maybe solve a problem or some question that they're given by visiting different places.
Let me jump in there. So the scavenger hunt idea, that's a really nice one. And I do that at one university I teach at. There's a scavenger hunt for the first year students, and it helps them to familiarize themselves with the campus. So how would you do that? Would you do that with AR, or would you do it with VR or MR? How would you do that?
I would, well, what comes to mind is for scavenger hunts, maybe easier to do them with AR. Before, in the past, I used some free apps that were available. I think it is not available anymore, and that is one thing that I feel like we need more apps coming in for VR, for AR. Sorry, HP Reveal is one of those apps that we used in the past. I think in the beginning it was called Erasmus, and then later the name changed to HP Reveal, but even maybe HP Reveal is not available now. And the reason I say we need more of these apps is that they allow you to create AR content and connect it either to a location or to a marker. I think this one was marker based, if I remember correctly. So by adding like some digital content to an image or a trigger in the real world, you'd be able to send out people on these hunts and to ask them to go to places, maybe scan things. And initially, either get familiar with the place or try to find an answer to a question that you give them in the end. So
they presumably would take quite a bit of setting up, wouldn't they? You'd have to program in the locations of all of the what would you call it? All of the objects. So you'd have to spend maybe an afternoon or a day setting it up, and then it would work well. Is that right?
Yeah, if it's location based, that's the case. But if it's marker based, you would have it could be even an AR marker that looks like a QR code that you place in different places, or it could be an image that's tied to it could be an AR card like Eric does a lot of times. So something that can be easily detected by the camera lens and has been previously kind of attached or linked to a digital object, either a video that you want to appear on top of that QR code or whatever you have there, the trigger or the marker, or it could be a 3D object or any sort of digital information from simple text to 3D objects. Yes. That is it. Yes.
I just searched for AR card. So basically the card is a piece of paper or something, and it has a special pattern on it. And then when the person scans the pattern on their phone, the phone recognizes the pattern and then superimposes the 3D model on top. Is that correct?
That is exactly right. Yes. Right. Superimposing is the right term. Thank you.
Right. So where do you get these AR cards from? Do you know? Like, can you buy them somewhere, or is it, how do you get hold of these AR cards?
So with those apps that I mentioned before that are unfortunately no more available, you would be able to create that. So if you had an image, you could print that and make a card or just a piece of paper that you'd place or put up somewhere, and then be able to scan that and link. And it's been already linked to some digital objects, so that object would be superimposed on that card. But some people may create their own cards, or well, there are some businesses that have been using it. So if you like scan the package of a product that you buy, you'd be able to use that. So it all goes back to having available an AR authoring tool, I would call it. So if you have a platform that allows you as a user, without knowledge of coding or being able to use Unity or other engines for creating AR, if you'd be able to, just as a general user, able to connect this, a digital object, to an image or a trigger, then you'd be good to go. We don't have as many of these apps around, unfortunately, these days. Some of them come, they disappear, like they're by startups that are not very stable and around for a very long time, unfortunately.
That is a problem, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, this is like it's like link rot. You know, when you find a site that you really like, and then a month later, it's something else. It's something new. You know.
I know.
But I think I picked up three distinct use cases there from you, Mehrasa. One was scavenger hunts, one was guided tours, and one was like a virtual community, because you mentioned that you used Gather Town when we were online and everything like that. Have you considered, or have you tried setting the students a homework task that can be completed using AR or VR, for example?
I haven't done that myself yet, but yeah, that is one of the things that I thought after using Gather in class. I thought this could be used for out-of-class learning, out-of-class collaborative projects, or even as a self-access learning area, learning environment. So if you can pretty much embed any sort of content like PDF files, or if you have documents or videos or anything into the environment, send people, if it is a large space, send people out on these VR hunts and ask them to go find what they should study on their own, or just like a virtual self-access learning center, virtual self. You can do that easily using Gather or similar platforms. Okay. So yeah, that has been on my mind, but I haven't done that yet.
Okay. And I want to, we're getting up to over an hour here, but I want to finish up by asking a question that I ask all of my guests, which is, normally I ask them about AI, but I'm going to ask you about XR. Okay, so do you think that XR is overall a threat or an opportunity for language teachers? So AR, VR, and AR together, all together, yeah.
Sure. As an early adopter and enthusiast, maybe I see it more of an opportunity than a threat. So, but yeah, these technologies do get combined with AI sometimes. Maybe that's where the threat comes in. Yes. Because you could have a chatbot, for example, in a VR space. And so it would give you the immersion that you need, the context that you need, plus the conversational partner that you'd need to practice a second language, maybe. Yeah, well, at the moment, I think I see it more as a factor that complements what I do as a teacher, rather than replace the entire teaching profession. So I don't see it as a threat yet. Maybe in the future, if technology advances even more than it is, it may be, well, as teachers, we will then need new set of skills to develop, so that will be around. So it's probably, going to be a skills, a challenge for teachers to develop as many skills as they can, so they can stay around. And even with all these technologies, they have something to contribute to the task of learning.
We have to upskill ourselves, I think, is the lingo these days.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I want to mention one more thing, which is this website called Immerse. Let me just share my screen one more time here. This website, this company has positioned itself as being the new era of language learning. As we know, these companies come and go, right? They declare themselves as being, the thing that everyone's going to be doing, and then they disappear. But
That's so right.
I'm not sure I'm open to the idea. But anyway, this company is using HMDs, like this, yeah, HMDs to teach languages. So I'm just curious, like in terms of theory and methodology, like Steve Krashen, who argues for comprehensible input, or Meryl Swain, who talks about comprehensible output, or interactionism, or behaviorism. Like, how do the methodologies tie into this technology, do you think, Mehrasa?
Yeah, well, these technologies try to get the students to communicate as much as I can. This particular platform, I think I have attended a presentation where the company itself was asking for researchers to around the world. They'd be happy to provide you with access to the platform in exchange for you doing research. And they were very much, interested in the methodology of it. So if you're able to redefine the learning experience using these platforms, I'd say they have value, and they have a connection to what we learn in theory. But if you're just replacing what you do in person, what you could do face to face, maybe in a simpler manner with these high-end technologies that require a device and a lot of perhaps sometimes complicated setup and training, you're probably not very faithful to the goal of to your goals as a teacher. So well, I see most of these VR apps especially as supporting perhaps situational learning, situated language learning. So they try to put you in the context so that you'd be able to place yourself in an environment with less perhaps anxiety and more willingness to communicate. Thank you for putting up the SAMR model too.
No problem. Yeah, so the anxiety thing you mentioned, I think that's also a part of Krashen's model, isn't it? He calls it the effective filter. So I think he has five different hypotheses as part of his model: a comprehensible input, the effective filter, the monitor hypothesis. And the effective filter is if a student is too nervous or too anxious or too depressed, they won't learn language, even if the other conditions are ideal. Even if the messages are comprehensible, if the student is too anxious or nervous or depressed, they won't learn. And this thing I'm showing right now, I think, ties into what you were saying. If we're simply switching our physical reality for virtual reality and changing nothing else, then that's just substitution, isn't it? That's the first level of the SAMR model.
Yes.
But if we are doing things in virtual reality that we couldn't do in actual reality, then that would be redefinition, I suppose, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we want to mostly as educators shoot for modification or redefinition. So transforming the learning experience, giving learners agency, putting them in the center of the learning experience is what we hopefully want to be able to do using technology. Otherwise, we are just enhancing slightly, but not changing things around to the level that would be worth all the effort you have to put into it.
And please do go ahead and check out Mehrasa's work. Follow her on Twitter, and hopefully I'll be talking to you again once you are Japanese.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And also thank you, Lucy, for your kind comment. I think it was sent as a direct message to me. But thank you, everybody, really, for being here and for listening to me talk. Sorry, sometimes I talk too much, perhaps,
Not at
on
all.
a certain topic.